The situation in Ukraine has changed drastically since our last update on the conflict on March 25th, so I want to do a quick roundup of what's happened since then and how what the world suspected was a pivot point in the war has in fact become such. Over the past week and a half, Russia has essentially given up on capturing Kiev and overthrowing the democratic Ukrainian regime. Regardless of what happens from here, this is a major victory for Ukraine. This means that Russia has failed outright to accomplish its initial war goals. Ukraine's staunch defense of the capital, combined with Russia's own logistical failures, as discussed in previous videos, have forced Russia to completely change its war aims. There is historical precedence for this. During the Winter War in 1939 and 40, the Soviet Union attempted to conquer all of Finland and install a puppet regime which likely would have voted for unification with Moscow. However, Moscow drastically underestimated Finnish capabilities, along with their home turf advantage. After the Finns dealt the Soviets numerous defeats, both on skis in forest guerrilla warfare and in open tank and artillery battles, the Soviets were not only forced to pour in many more troops than originally intended, but they also had to completely adjust their war aims. Now, that doesn't mean that the fighting nor the result was not extremely painful for Finland, which had to endure the bloody conquest of its second city, Viipuri, and then had to sign it away in a peace deal, but the Finns had at least prevented themselves from being completely conquered, and Helsinki remained independent and sovereign. A similar situation appears to be developing in Ukraine. Russia, having failed to capture Kiev or Chernigov in the north, has effectively given up on total conquest, and the Ukrainians have earned their largest and most morale-boosting victories of the war. Like during the Winter War, it appears Russia will now be satisfied with just the pieces of Ukraine that it considers strategic. That being the area Putin likes to refer to as Novorossiya, New Russia, the name of a former Tsarist governorate, comprising the entirety of Ukraine's Black Sea coast from Odessa to Mariupol. It also includes the rest of the Donbass region, with Luhansk troops stretching to the north to attempt to capture Lysychansk and surrounding areas, while the Donetsk militias branch out to the west and are also assisting in the siege of Mariupol. In the city of Mariupol, it appears that Russia is on the verge of victory, having split the Ukrainians into distinct pockets, but they're still holding out fiercely, and the Ukrainian military continues to attempt to resupply them. The humanitarian situation is beyond disastrous both for the troops and civilians, with reports of civilians unable to find drinking water sipping from puddles on the street, starving soldiers, and a complete lack of medical services, with the city's infrastructure estimated to be 90% destroyed. The one other attack Russia does still have going is the siege of Kharkov, or Kharkiv. Many speculate that this is still on Russia's to-do list, with military analysts signaling that Russia may attempt to win the entire east and south of Ukraine in one large movement, perhaps with a southern thrust toward Dnipropetrovsk and a northern thrust around Kharkiv, looking to surround from behind the Ukrainian troops which are dug in the Donbass. Whether that's the exact plan or not, Russia is seemingly gearing up for a new offensive in the east and south. In fact, that's what their state-run media admits, that they're pulling troops out of the north to reinforce the east and the south. It appears that Russia is preparing to, in the situation that they do capture all of the east and south of the country, declare that that was their plan all along. The rest of the world, however, will understand that although Ukraine may pay a price in territory and certainly has in lives, that retaining its sovereignty in the present democratic regime in Kiev would be a major victory. Just the fact that the civilian population of Kiev no longer has to worry about the Russian army on their doorstep is already a major victory for Ukraine. With the way the war is gone, there's absolutely no guarantee that Russia's next offensive in the east and south will have any more success than their previous ones, especially given the ongoing muddy Rosputitsa, the fact that after 2 months Kharkiv still has not been captured, and the fact that cities like Odessa and Dnipropetrovsk have been essentially unblemished for 2 months, allowing time to build up extensive defenses. Should take the opportunity to note that in 2016, during the Donbass War, Ukraine wanted to rename renamed Dnipropetrovsk, which dated from the communist era. However, it didn't want to play into its place within Russian history by readopting the city's traditional classicalist name, Yekaterinoslav, honoring the Russian Empress Catherine the Great, instead simply shortening the name to Dnipro, a name that has become much more widely known and used during the current conflict, as have the Ukrainian spellings and names of various cities, such as Chernigov or Chernihiv, and the aforementioned Kharkov or Kharkiv. As we've always done in our videos, the name of the city listed on the map reflects those currently in control. Ukraine certainly hopes that control over Dnipro and Kharkiv remains within their hands, but it appears a tough fight is on the way as Russia gears up for its new offensive. Meanwhile, internally within Russia, the Putin regime understands that it has to be able to claim a victory of some kind, or else it would risk losing whatever legitimacy it has left. Thus, if capturing all of Ukraine was destined to be a failure, the Kremlin saw no choice but to change objectives. That way they can declare some kind of victory in the east and the south. That said, paranoia within the Kremlin walls, whatever the reason, is evident. Since the start of the war, several pictures have emerged of Vladimir Putin meeting with officials and sitting almost incomprehensibly far away from anybody else. Speculation has been widespread as to why. Is Putin sick? Does he fear assassination by his ministers? Is he simply sending a signal of czar-like power? Outside the Kremlin walls, nobody really knows. One near certainty is that Putin is doing everything possible to prepare the ground for declaring some kind of victory in the current conflict. Pulling their troops out of Kiev and redeploying to the east, while painting the picture that the east and south was the goal all along, is part of this strategy, but there may be more steps as well. On March 27th, the leader of the Russian puppet state in Luhansk, Leonid Pasechnik, announced that the breakaway state may hold a referendum on joining Russia, similar to what is assumed to be a staged Crimea referendum under Russian military control in 2014. 2 days later, on the 29th, Denis Pushilin, the Russian-backed leader in Donetsk, also proclaimed intentions on holding a referendum to join the Russian Federation. He laid out the conditions under which such a referendum might take place, namely once the Donetsk People's Republic captures all of its claimed territory, including Mariupol. It can be assumed that a similar set of conditions would be the prerequisite for a referendum to be held in Luhansk, principally the capture of all of its claimed territory, including capturing the still Ukrainian-held city of Lysychansk. The next day, on the 30th, Anatoly Bibalov, leader of the Russian puppet state in Georgia, South Ossetia, also declared intentions on holding a referendum to join the Russian Federation. Now, South Ossetia has actually voted on the matter before, but the seemingly coordinated effort of all three Russian puppet states declaring this intention within 4 days of each other implies that this may be a Moscow-driven initiative and that the Kremlin may intend to annex these three areas. Abkhazia, another Russian puppet state in Georgia, where Russia has a naval base, has so far stated that it intends to remain at least nominally independent. Meanwhile, Transnistria, based in Tiraspol to the west of Odessa, has yet to signal any future intentions, but it would be logical if establishing a ground connection to the Russian puppet state would be in the Kremlin's sights following their theoretical capture of Odessa in the upcoming campaign in the south. All of these announcements by Russia's satellites regard actions that would be taken after a potential Russian victory in these upcoming campaigns, and the successful conquest of the east and the south, allowing the Kremlin to declare some kind of victory. This is no guarantee, however, as weapons and munitions continue pouring into Ukraine, including in recent weeks the tanks and other armored vehicles that will be needed on the wide-open steppes of eastern and southern Ukraine. Whether it's enough remains to be seen, but one thing is for sure, another large-scale campaign, potentially a titanic struggle, and one that could determine much of both Russia and Ukraine's future, appears to be imminent. Thanks for watching this update. We've once again updated the apolitical world map to reflect the current situation on the ground, not just in Ukraine, but in fact on all the conflicts going on around the world. So check that out at apoliticalworldmap.org. Make sure to like the video, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, and if you can, donate on Patreon. We'll return with another update, along with getting back to some videos on other topics. For now, thanks so much for watching. I'm Alex. I am out.